Hi, Gordon.
Hi, how are you guys
It's,
doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you as well. Yeah, it's lovely meeting you guys here.
You too. Thanks so much for joining us in this project.
No worries, no worries. It's my pleasure.
So I'll introduce us. I'm Giulia, and next to me is Phoebe, and she's the head of content, and
Okay.
I'm the manager for the Career in Law, and we are the ones who created the project for Career in Law. So we have a couple of questions for you. I don't know if you've seen them, um,
Yeah.
but I am ready to start whenever you are.
Yeah, I'm ready, of course. Yeah, I have a look, so we'll be fine.
Okay. So this is a mix from questions from our audience, from Instagram and LinkedIn. So it's the things that our audience wants to know. So
Okay.
the first one is why you decided to pursue a career in law. I feel like this is always the hardest question to answer in an interview.
Well, I mean, for me, I would say law come across to me as a very challenging subject because when you were in high school, you probably wouldn't have that much opportunity to explore the legal sphere because what
Yeah.
you're exposed to is like economics or maybe mathematics or like politics, history, that kind of thing. I feel
Yeah.
like law is just an interesting area that it kind of correlates to every aspect of our life. When I study economics, I also study a bit of competition law, and I can see the interaction between commerce and also the legal regulations. So that I think is a pretty interesting area to explore further as my undergraduate study.
Yeah, sure. It's always really interesting to see how law actually impacts you every day and you don't even realize.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so the second question is how long it took you to secure a role at Baker McKenzie?
Well, I would say the short answer is a year after I graduated, but I don't want to give an impression that it sounds not too long compared to other candidates, but the fact that also there were a period of time after I graduated, I kind of treat it like a 9 to 5 job, like applying for a training contract. So I think I just try to emphasize that aspect as well. It's not like a year, okay, I just suddenly apply and I got it. It's not that straightforward in general anyway.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We all know. um, so, what are the three top lessons that you learned from your job applications then to different training contracts and things like that?
I would say the first lesson I learned is definitely learn from your mistakes because there are definitely times that you attend a video interview at Watson Glacier task or assess centers and end up not getting any offer. And usually the first response you have is just maybe to feel upset or even cry, some people. But I mean it is kind of common for you have those emotional issues after that. But also I realized that every time I felt an interview I take maybe 1 or 2 or even a week sometime to take a break, and then I would try to memorize or like remember all the questions I was asked during
Yeah,
those interviews, and then I put it down into like a question bank. That's why I was sharing these resources to other people because this is a resources that I used after every failure and also failed interview, so that I learned from those mistakes. And I think that's the key number one. And the key number two is you need to be open to opportunities, I would say, because sometimes although maybe you want this training contract, is what you want, ultimately. But the thing is, when you also look for other opportunities, maybe not even legally related or other studying overseas or a work placement in somewhere else, that may lead to something better as well. Because you never know. There were times I just literally applied to some random jobs, even an internship in Italy, and up it helped me with my application in the UK. I didn't expect that. So I feel like you need to be open to opportunities so that you can actually improve yourself professionally or even personally as well. And the third lesson I would say is you definitely need to work so hard because law is an insanely competitive industry, and I do think that by hard work I mean there's actually no limit. I think because some people when you study for exam you feel like I already studied hard enough, but I do think that if you are aiming at something that is so hard, then probably need to work as hard as just you possibly can. I think it's no limitation as well. And I think you all good for you when you are at a younger age, that you actually try to work so hard on something and to see what will really happen if you try to work so hard. So I think it's also an advice I would give, although you also need to take care of your mental health, that kind of stuff. But I would say it's always good to test your limit when you are in your 20s or like early 20s.
Yeah, there's no better time to completely understand what your limits are when you're young and you've just entered the working world.
Yeah, sure.
So what are your interests outside of law? What do you do, and how much do you think they helped you with your application?
Yeah, I think for me, I would say the fact that I'm really keen on exploring different kinds of culture or people in general, because the fact that I think in the past 3 years, I kind of move around as well in general, like probably 6-7 times across the country for numerous reasons, maybe for work placement, for studies, for any kind of things like that. I think the fact that I'm open to some sudden change that happens to my life or to my career, that I embrace that kind of changes and try to find something, like learn some meaningful lessons from it. Maybe it's a short workplace, maybe it's an overseas study, and then you experience different kinds of people, and those people may have values completely different to me. For example, I remember when I was in Cambridge specifically, I met so many people maybe from Latin America, or from the US, from Europe, etc. Those people always have values about chase your dream, that kind of thing. It's such a westernized thing as well, I would say sometimes, but it kind of affects me to shape my mindset, or when I deal with application or training contract rejections, because if it's something that you really want to do, I just realized you kind of need to go 100% for it. So I mean, those concepts I wouldn't have learned it so profoundly without meeting those people, without putting myself out there in a different uncomfortable situation or atmosphere. I think that's probably what I can say for this.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's definitely easier to develop your perspective when you're constantly meeting people from different backgrounds and different beliefs, and it can really enrich how you think.
Yes, because I think that's also why diversity and inclusion is important, because as a human being, we just tend to be with someone who is similar to us in the first place, so that we wouldn't want to step outside of comfort zone. So I think it's good that to put yourself in that situation. Whether you like it or not is another thing, but the thing is you do it first and see maybe there's something you can learn from it, although you feel uncomfortable in the first place. So that's probably why, I would say that.
Yeah, like every situation has a silver lining, and ultimately every experience is always a learning curve. So I don't think there's ever anything really negative that you can take from an experience. There's always something positive out of it that can help you.
Yeah, definitely.
The last question from me before I hand over to Phoebe is, what advice would you give to students who are struggling to secure employment in the legal sector, of course?
Well, actually, I do think that this probably applies to, I would say, every aspect, because for me, there's always this one thing that I believe in the most, is be consistent in anything you really want to do. Because so far in my past, when I'm consistent, even back in law school, I'm consistent with working hard on my schoolwork or stuff, exams, stuff like that, I will do well in at the end. And when I'm consistent on my LinkedIn posts, for example, and then I will also consistently help people and also help me with my maybe personal branding as well. So I think it's just the fact that you're always consistent in doing the thing you actually want to do. And then it applies to employment as well. If you apply for a few times and then you get rejected and you are not consistent in your efforts, and then suddenly you want it again, and then you just start doing it for a few months and then you got rejected, and then you take a break for 6 months again, it wouldn't work, because in the long term you kind of need to combine all those small efforts together. It's a long journey, so that you really need to be consistent every single time. I do believe that for someone, even though have a very maybe less impressive CV or applications, if they're really consistent in the sense that they work a small step every day, towards that goal. I do think that no matter how bad your CV in the first place, you will still get something at the end that are really good because of that consistent efforts. That's just what I believe in personally.
Yeah, that's definitely great motivation to keep trying to chase what you want out of life.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to hand over to Phoebe, who's got her questions. Thank you so much for answering mine. It's been really eye-opening for myself as well, especially hearing it from someone who's been through it all. It's like, this is solid evidence I can really take from. So thank you for this, and I'll hand you over to Phoebe.
So thank you for sharing your experiences. So moving on, I will ask you some questions raised by our audience. So first question would be, apart from showing international experiences in applications, what else can international students do to stand out from the crowd?
I would say in general, I would say as an international student, the way you stand out is, I would say, is actually applicable to even local students because it's still an application. I think the reason why most international students couldn't make it that far in the application stage is they're not familiar with the techniques or the way they is different from what they experience back home. I think that's that one determinative factor that helped me to get my training contract is the fact that I show a strong reason why I want to work in London specifically. This is always a barrier for international students to show. From a recruiter's perspective, they will feel like, oh, you have other second options back home. Why do you come all the way to London and want to practice here, competing with other candidates? So for me, I always have this clear vision or to showcase that I enjoy the multi-international aspect of a transactional deal in London, because London is like in a driving seat of all those giant mergers or acquisition. So for me, it's like working in London, I will have a bird's eye view of all the transaction from different perspectives because I need to coordinate with different lawyers in other jurisdictions very frequently. That is something that I couldn't have experienced in other jurisdictions that is not as prestigious as a legal market as London. So I think you kind of need to explain your reason, or it's a personal reason as well, could be, and then the recruiter will really see that you are not deciding to apply for a training contract just out of blue. I think that's very important.
Yeah, definitely. So the second question would be, what is the perfect way to approach why are you applying to this law firm question?
Yeah, I think I always, when it comes to these kinds of question, firstly, I would definitely kind of name drop someone I met at a law firm event, or to mention an experience or interaction I had with this particular law firm first, because then outright from the start, the law firm or the recruiter would know that, okay, this person actually knows about the firm, or actually interacted with them, so that they didn't just apply to random big law firm that they want to work for because of salary or the prestige. So I think that's a very important first starting point for your answer to this question. Then I would stick to maybe a 3 reasons approach or 2 reasons. I would do my research beforehand. Maybe firstly, the practice area strength really attracts me. Like, for example, Baker McKenzie, big M&A transaction. I talked to the associate. They told me that one deal could possibly involve over 100 jurisdictions sometime, which is crazy and which excites me as well. So I think that's the first reason. And then second reason, I can talk about diversity and initiative, Baker ethnicity, for example, those initiatives you research on the website, and then it aligns with your personal values. Then you could also mention your volunteering experience in the past, align with those values as well. So then it also showcases that you care about the firm, not because of only their prestige, but also because of their business values and also their activities for helping people. And also like pro bono initiative, that kind of thing, you could also mention if the firm is really big on those initiatives. So I would say usually, in short, firstly, you need to mention your first encounter with the firm, and secondly, make at least 2 to 3 reasons why you really love this firm based on your research. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, so that's why we always say it's important to join some insight days to network with different associate or people from the firm. Yeah. So do you also recommend any kind of structure when answering the application questions?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say first of all, application questions could be pretty diverse because like many firms also have different styles of application questions. But I would say in general, for any kinds of questions, you try to make it really structural in the sense that you always don't want to ignore like introductory paragraph, like stating your position. Maybe they could ask you a question about particular like the way the firm competes with other firms, how they actually pitch, be attractive to their clients, things like that. You always need to make it very structural and state your reason. Firstly, secondly, thirdly, make it those signposts and also those transition phrases actually helps a lot to deliver your answer in a very effective and explicit way. I think law firms always want to see that you can deliver a message very structurally and very clearly and concisely. I think that's the first key. And for competency-based question, it's also common for some firms to ask those questions either even in application forms or maybe in interviews. And I think the STAR formula is always heard of by many students. I'm sure, like state the situation, the task, the action, and the results. I think it's a good structure to actually use. And usually, I think the best scenario is for you to talk to your friend, actually telling them your experience using this structure, because sometimes you always feel like you already have this experience and then you will think that you explain it very clearly. But for someone who has never heard of your experience, they may think the way you deliver the answer is not that clear or it's not detailed enough. That's always the case, especially when it comes to interview as well. So I think it's always good for you to let your friend read this particular way of delivering the message. And lastly, I would say for work experience section of an application form, you always want to highlight the specific actions and sometimes even quantify that in a way. For example, you work in a team with 20 people, and then you review you are in a law firm working in a document review of over 1,000 documents. Just try to use those figures to showcase what you actually do for this particular work or job. I think that also helps to demonstrate that to let the recruiters have an idea of what you actually do, rather than just saying things like I improve my research skill or I improve my client interaction skills, that kind of thing, which is a little bit more general and not specific enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our audience will find this very useful. And do you still have any tips for them to for the Watson-Glacier test?
Yeah, sure. For Watson-Glacier test, I would say, first of all, you can research some law firms online. Some of them have some sample questions, maybe Hogan Lovells or CC, I think, Kibler's Chance, and you could use those as a starting point. And at the end of the day, I do think that it's also sometimes a good strategy if you're really bad at Watson-Glacier test to do it more. So that sometimes maybe there are some firms that you're not actually that interested in, but they also potentially have this as part of the stage of practice. Then I think you could still try to apply to those firms to actually get the chance to practice that test at least. And I think in the past, I also did that because I feel like it's always good for you to have experience. And sometimes I would say among the law firms, the Watson-Glacier test is kind of repetitive in some way. Some question you may even see again in another firm's Watson-Glacier test. So I think it's always important for you to actually practice, and it does make perfect. So I think that's another way to do it. Finally, I would say also use some online paid resources if you really want to improve. I think there's no harm for some people who want to do that, like take that extra step or to incur some financial expenses in order to perfect the test. Although whether it's useful or not depends on the provider. But I think if you really crave for other extra resources, that could be the way to go.
Yeah, great. So our last question for you is, what do you think makes you stand out as a training contract candidate in terms of skills, talent, qualifications, and also interests?
Yeah, I think first of all, probably talents could be discounted. I mean, I don't think that actually matters that much at the end of the day. Although you can't, if you're a law student, that means you're already good enough in the first place to even compete. That's what I genuinely believe, because law degree is not an easy degree in the first place. And I would say there are 4 aspects at least. First of all, work experiences. because law firm are looking for a whole package, you can say. They're looking for someone who's well-rounded. So for your work experiences, you don't want to only show like specific law firms, internships only. You could showcase volunteering, you could showcase working in banks or financial institutions, because some of those are also their clients as well. Other than that, you can also show some non-legal work experiences, hospitality as well, working for long hours, dealing with difficult clients. Those are also important features and also skills. Second of all, I would say is background as well. Some people, maybe also myself included, I have more international background coming from Hong Kong, and then I did my study in the UK, and also I did my study in the bar exam in New York, so that it kind of makes me a more interesting candidate for some of the recruiters potentially, and that definitely helps. And thirdly, I would say qualification in terms of, sometimes I would say LLM or like further studies could be helpful, because although some firms actually clearly states that they don't actually place that much emphasis on like master's degree, say, but also I do think that if you take a master's degree and it focuses on a very specific niche area, say if you're interested in intellectual property and then you took a master's degree there, or you're interested in shipping law, and then firms like HFW or firms like Bird & Bird, they will be really interested in those candidates because you already have a specific practice area interest, or an area that you really want to work in. So I think that's a really good starting point if you actually genuinely have a specific interest, and then you do this extra qualification. That will help you get a training contract as well. And lastly, I would say it's an interesting hobby, because for me, I did put something like I'm interested in the outer space as well, the law or the regulation regarding that. That actually helps me in terms of during the partner interview. They asked me why I was interested in that, and I actually explain all those who owns the moon, that kind of conversation with them for no reason, but they enjoy the conversation. I think that kind of help when you actually put something that is not really that common among other candidates. Then I think it will help you stand out, because it showcases that you're not like you have some more weird or interesting hobby that could potentially be make you a more interesting person than other maybe mechanical lawyers or law students. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you for your fruitful sharing, and thank you again for your time. And I hope our audience will know more about your experiences and get some good inspirational ideas from you. Make sure you have subscribed to our socials, CareerInLaw, and also Gordon on LinkedIn, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Phoebe and Giulia.
Thank you so much. And also, if you subscribe, you can see the content that Phoebe's going to create out of this video. We're really looking forward to seeing it, and we hope you really like it.
Yeah, I definitely will. Thank you so much for having me anyway. Yeah, have a lovely day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.